Exmoxbuzong, or the future world as it's known by its inhabitants, is a young realm teeming with opportunities and stories. One such story is that of the dwarven fortress known as Sundersweep, the Dawn Palace. In the spring of the year 100, 7 dwarves of the civilization known as the Humble Portals set off south in search of their destiny. Finding themselves weary after 3 days of travel, the dwarves settle next to a brook in a land known as the Hopeful Plains. Here is where these brave dwarves staked their claim on the land. The dwarves, a ragtag bunch who adequately named their group the Failed Plan, had an interesting set of skills amongst them. Smog McFinney, the beekeeper and cook, who never quite knows where he is or how he got there. Lachy McCumbleson, a humble fisherman and cook, who equally balances the values of harmony, empathy, and brawling. Yames Frothbeard, a metalsmith, scholar, and cook, whose practical and focused nature leaves them little time for abstract thinking. B, the self-proclaimed cop/prophet, a strong dwarf who never lets things like depression, perseverance, courage, or good advice get in the way of exerting his strength over others. Alex Buchanan, B's right-hand deputy, a loyal, dutiful, if not needy dwarf who lives by the letter of the law. And today's letter is B. Wheels, the criminal and thief, a clever, chaotic dwarf who takes life and wallets as he sees it. And finally, the expedition leader, Hecks Many Hands, an extravagant leader who had to be skilled in just about everything that wasn't related to the justice system or cooking. The group set out with some copper gear for the coppers and enough alcohol to keep them alive for the next year. Lord knows Hecks will need it to get him through the day. At the base of that secluded valley, at the edge of the brook, the dwarves struck the earth. The initial days were uneventful for everyone except for Hecks and Lachy. Lachy spent his days fishing, while Hecks clear-cut a small forest for wood, built workshops, and began mining. Everyone else milled around the wagon, occasionally hauling the piece of furniture into place, but mostly just taking turns making fish stew. An excavation effort uncovered a vast labyrinth of underground caverns, and the group's first encounter with its denizens. A scouting party of sparrowmen led to a tense standoff before the army simply wandered away. A warning that tribes of sentient life surround us from all sides and a reminder to remain vigilant. The fort continued to slowly expand, first a common room for the dwarves to socialize and a dormitory for them to sleep in. Luxuries such as individual bedrooms would have to come later, when there was more than one miner, and when that miner wasn't also in charge of everything except for cooking. Word had gotten around that a new fortress had been founded, and sparrowmen were afoot. 3 visitors arrived to offer their services as monster hunters. Libash, Serid, and Rhodey joined the ranks as mercenary protectors, trading their skills as monster hunters in exchange for food and board. The first wave of dwarven migrants brought excitement and promise, which was quickly shattered when they announced their skills as a clothier and a tanner. At least we'd die well dressed. The expansion of the fortress population uncovered a need for the delineation of roles in the fort's management. As founding members, the dwarves were assigned priority to these noble roles. B would stand as sheriff, in charge of the fort's justice system. Alex Buchanan, the hammerer, the unquestioning executor of B's justice. Hecks, expedition leader and manager, would oversee diplomacy and work orders. Wheels, who would use his intimidation and lying skills to create deals as the trade broker. And Yames, whose practical mind would serve well as the fort's bookkeeper. Lachy and Smog were exempt from nobility, as Lachy was far too humble, and Smog simply went to the wrong meeting room. A second wave of migrants brought with them a sorely needed miner and woodcutter, which meant the production of wood products could truly begin, as could the underground farming project. In the underground caverns, an area of farmland was cleared and walled off in preparation for flooding. A roof was constructed to stop any sparrowmen from flying over the walls, and a pipe and pump system was built in the above ground to eventually pump water from the brook into the cavern. The project was a complete success, ignoring a little bit of unwanted flooding, and of course the herd of horrifying elk beasts that escaped from the caverns and definitely didn't ruin the subtle ecological balance above ground. Overall, the first year of the fortress was working better than expected. Lachy caught loads of fish, Smog cooked them up, Wheels and Yames practiced some crafting, Bee and Alex fell in love while practicing their sexy military drills, and Hecks made sure no one died. Bosu the Goblin arrived with two compatriots, Nashrat the Human Axeman and Digal the Marksdwarf. Now one may think, surely it's xenophobic and a bit goblin racist to immediately and without trial judge a sentient creature as being evil, and one would be correct. But one would also be very incorrect. Goblins in Exmoxbuzong covered artifacts and murder. Throughout their 100-year history of this realm, the Dark Goblin Pits have consistently produced spies who befriend dwarves, humans and elves alike, only to extract information about artifacts. Though Sundersweep currently holds no artifacts of its own, Bosu the Goblin made no hesitation before asking for another relic, the Jade Orb. The Jade Orb is an artifact of great value, a cedar goblet adorned with sheephoof, cat bone and oval bismuthite cabochons. Carved into the wood is an image commemorating Mebzuth Gear Punches the Dwarf as his appointment as Hammerer. Lybash the Dwarf and Alir the Human, who had been employed as monster hunters for the fort, were the first to alert the guard to this shady inquiry. Sheriff B and Deputy Alex adorned their copper gear, grabbed their justice batons and made their way to the inn. Smog McPhinney, oblivious to the impending danger, sidled up next to Bosu to share some stories, just as B and Alex entered the tavern, weapons drawn. Accusations of treachery were thrown at the goblin, and whether calculated or not, this chaos triggered one of the other visitors to make a fatal error. Digal, another visiting Marksdwarf, fired his crossbow across the busy hall. The bolt struck Smog the beekeeper in the left upper leg, tearing the tendon.
I used to be an adventurer like you.
As he limped out of the room to safety, Deputy Alex bashed the Marksdwarf across the head with his hammer in retaliation. The Marksdwarf dropped his crossbow and fell over, while Deputy Alex, following the sexy training from his captain, plunged his teeth into the Marksdwarf's chest, latching on firmly. Alir the monster hunter stabbed Digal through his torso, lodging the spear firmly in the wound and severing his spine. B then finished the job with an accurate bash to the third finger left hand, exploding the part into gore, twisting the wrist and opening an artery. There are two more pages of these three just beefing on an unarmed, considerably stabbed dwarf, so for brevity's sake we'll move on with the story. Alir pulls his spear from the fallen dwarf's stomach and charges the goblin, stabbing his right forearm and severing the ligament. The goblin drops his shield as B bashes the wounded arm with his hammer, further crushing the bone. B then started bashing the goblin from the bottom up, crushing the tendons in his right foot, then delivering a harsh blow to the right leg. As the goblin's legs buckled, Alir spin-kicked the goblin in the right eye, exploding his face into a bloody mess. B then bashed the goblin's sword arm, jamming the bone through the shoulder, forcing the goblin to drop his weapon. Unsatisfied with the number of broken goblin arms being just one, he then did the same with the left arm. Deputy Alex repeatedly punched the buckled over goblin in the stomach, until B delivered the final blow with a hammer strike to the head, twisting the neck and tearing apart the spine's nervous tissue. Nashrat, the final member of this travelling band of miscreants, had until this point not entered the battle or shown any signs of aggression, and Lybash the monster hunter took this personally. He struck the human with a swift kick to the right hand, forcing him to drop his iron battle axe. This gave B the chance to strike his throat with a hammer, forcing him to the ground and pleading in mercy. B and Alir proceeded to punch him in the face with a very teeth-focused attack strategy. The next few minutes were spent punching, hammering and biting Nashrat's teeth, knocking almost all of them out onto the tavern floor. Lybash ended the brawl with a swift strike to the head, caving Nashrat's skull into the brain. Needless to say, it didn't end well for these visitors, and justice was the victor once more. The aftermath of the brawl was felt across the citizens of Sundersweep, as corpses were dragged through the halls, blood cleaned from the walls and a total of 17 teeth collected from the floor. Many were traumatized and left with mental scarring of the event. One dwarf, however, received significant physical scarring. Smog McPhinney lay unconscious in the tavern, a bloodied crossbow bolt torn from his leg and left on the cold stone floor. The dwarves quickly converted a storeroom into a makeshift hospital, and the call was put out for a qualified doctor. Though utterly falsified, Wheels took the opportunity to tell everyone that he was a world-famous brain surgeon and was put to work mending Smog's leg. After a professional diagnosis of being shot in the leg, a medical care plan was put in place. It was there where we discovered that Smog and Lachy had formed a relationship, likely based heavily on fish soup. Lachy brought some fishing line into the hospital and sutured Smog's wounds as Wheels continued setting the broken leg bone. Within a couple of months, and with a new ash crutch, Smog made a full recovery. He returned to his beehives, and whilst a little slower to move around, he was truly blessed to have such a sweet honey.